everybody? Tire Metalhead Weatherman here. Hopefully everyone is doing well and having a good week. Hopefully you're finishing out strong and crushing it. That being said here, we got some stuff to talk about here because there is a big pattern change here. And it's good news for a lot of us here because I'm pretty sure a lot of us are tired of this little cold snap over here. So look at the screen to the right. That's a little bit of a hint, and we'll get into that in just a second. Also making sure that you're hitting that like button if you're appreciating the content on here, because with this pattern shift, there's going to be a lot more active weather as well. So we'll be looking at maybe winter weather and maybe severe weather a little bit later down the line too. So make sure you're staying tuned for that, especially if you're new around here and I would consider subscribing. Also making sure you get that notification bell on, so that way you can be notified of all the videos and all the live streams, because I anticipate a few coming up in the not so very far off future. That being said, let's go ahead and actually get into what's over here on the screen to my right. So the 8 to 14 day outlook. This is looking at both temperature and precipitation. So I'm gonna mainly get into the temperature one here because that's the that's the biggest little trinket of good news here. And not to mention, it's kind of like Christmas Day for some of us here, because after dealing with -30 wind chills, I'm pretty sure we're happy to see this orange and this red on the board here. Now, there's one thing that I want to make sure I make clear here. Just because we're seeing these above average probabilities of temperature here does not mean that it's all of a sudden going to become summer. But this is showing that you're likely to see temperatures above average. Just by how much, still somewhat to be determined, but we'll go into the global models to talk about that, basically the Euro and the GFS. But pretty much the entire country, with the exception of Alaska, is going to be dealing with above average temperatures. Even Hawaii is looking like they're going to be above average here. So cold air finally starting to get on out of here, because it's been crazy even for me, working in occasionally about maybe below the teen temperatures first thing in the morning, and then not even getting above freezing on certain days. So it's been an experience for us all. But like I said, this is probably a welcome sight to a lot of you. So there's some good news for you there. As far as precipitation is concerned, pretty much not too much difference from what we've been seeing. Out towards the east, it's going to still be active. And then over towards the desert southwest and areas a little further to the north, we're actually going to start to see a little bit of a drying trend. Keep in mind here that, like I said, just like with the temperature map, seeing these probabilities of below average precip does not mean every day is going to be dry. But there may be more days that are a little bit more dry than the ones where we have precipitation. So that in mind here, the higher probability here would be a spot that I would pay closer attention to. But with the amount of moisture that we've had going through here in recent weeks, I don't think this will be too big of a problem. Of course, during this time of year, the pattern tends to flip a lot. So that being said, don't put too much merit into this. Alaska is another point of interest where it's going to be dry. And then one thing to make note of here, the Northwest, you guys can't seem to get the moisture to go away, and it looks like we're still going to be seeing that to close out the month here. So that being said, just be prepared for a little bit more in the way of rain and snow. But with that warming trend, I think we'll start to see a little bit more in the way of rain. Definitely don't want to see any more ice, that's for sure. It had ice storm and winter storm warnings over here for a while. So now that we've kind of gone over the outlooks, let's go ahead and switch over to our model data here after we look at the severe weather first. So one thing I'm going to make note of here really quick is, before I get into the model data here, of course, the first 3 days, nothing of interest, but day 4, 5, 6, basically days 4 through 8, we have predictability too low. So whereas before it was potential too low, predictability is too low for severe weather potential, thus meaning there are some signals out there that we might need to be paying close attention to. And now, with that being said, we'll go ahead and get into the model data here. So if you've been a part of the channel here, real quick, just to let you know, we do sometimes do these little split screen videos here. I'm still trying to figure out the best way to do these, but basically what we do is we look at two models here and we make our comparisons here. Typically, we go with the Euro and the GFS. This is the Euro to the left, GFS to the right. We're looking high up into the atmosphere at the upper levels, and we're kind of taking a look at the storm systems ahead here. We have another winter weather system that's going to be coming in. It's already dropped a boatload of snow and even some ice, which is prompted ice storm warnings over here towards the far reaches of the northwest here. This is eventually going to make its way towards the south here, and there is potential for wintry precipitation as well. Snow's going to be a little bit more towards the Ohio Valley this time instead of the southeast as much. Some areas could see some potential ice here, although totals right now have been light. If you want to see more detail on that, go check the video that I made, or go check out the video that I made last night. But basically looking at things from the Euro, this is that next storm system rolling in. Here's that Arctic blast is going to be coming behind that. It's going to be a very short-lived one. And then as we go in the next week, look what we have here. We start to see some ridging start to come into play. So these temperatures are going to start to warm up in accordance with what we saw in that outlook. And what we'll end up seeing is eventually this storm track will end up starting to pull more towards the Gulf Coast states. And with that comes the returning threat of maybe a few severe storms. So we're going to be keeping an eye on this region right now. Not going to get too heavy into the details because we're still pretty far out. But maybe in the next couple of days, we'll start to see a little bit more clarity in models right now. It's tricky to do stuff whenever it's 4+ days out, if you know what I'm saying. You have to have a really strong signal, and it just really isn't one right now. But there is something there. I can clearly see it, and you can see it even on this run here. You can see a little bit of the convergence and divergence in this region here. So like I said, it does look like business eventually picks up on the severe side of things. I do think winter weather will still be a factor, albeit mired further to the north, I would say, at this point. And you can continue to see the trending of trend of ridges here a little bit further off to the west here. For the most part, GFS is kind of compliant along with what the Euro is saying at this point. Here's that first ridge starting to kick in. And then shortly after that, that's when we start seeing that more active pattern off to the south here. Storm track looks slightly different to begin with, but after next week, we start to see an increase of activity, of course, a little further to the south. These troughs are going to be a key component to everything, of course, in their track. But it definitely looks like we are going to have a number of storm systems coming in, maybe even a couple of cutoff lows. And like I said, that can pose a mystery as far as the forecast all within itself here. I do think that eventually we may start to see a couple more cold snaps, maybe as we head towards February. But right now, like I said, 384 hours out. It's a long way to go. Still have my share of uncertainties with that. But for the most part, the trend is relatively the same here. We're mainly seeing a lot of congruency in regards to that ridge coming in and eventually having us warm back up to at least average temperatures, if not above. It's pretty likely that we're going to see above average temperatures, I would say, though. I won't say spring yet because, well, average temperatures right now in the dead of winter, maybe we'll see mostly 50s. Unless you're over towards the Gulf Coast states, that's when we'll start to see what would be closer to what would spring like temperatures be a little bit further towards, let's say, further up north towards the southeast and so on and so forth. But here's a look at things from a slightly lower altitude here. Like I said, these are some pretty impressive systems here on the Euro, and especially once we get later on into the run here. Like I said, you can definitely see a bit of troughing going on here. I do have my concerns with this one. I am interested in seeing what that will end up doing. And then a little later into the run, I saw this little piece of energy here that I'm interested in as well. So like I said, really from the 23rd and maybe the 27th seem to be my points of interest. And then of course here comes more ridging to follow. Maybe another maybe a little cool down right here towards the end of this run, but it's going to be very short-lived. And then this big ridge right here, I think, is going to set up the stage for a much bigger event down the line. So this is what GFS is kind of showing us. A little bit of a similar deal. Keep in mind GFS is a little bit later on in its run cycle right now. And then let's also keep in mind that This is the 18Z run. This is the 12Z run on the Euro. But you can pretty much see a lot of congruency between the runs, especially earlier on, and then where I start to see a little bit of a disconnect here is once we get past 168 hours here. This cutoff low is really what's kind of throwing things off a little bit, and then these other areas of low pressure that are trying to form amongst it. And this could change the setup with severe weather, maybe pushing it a little bit further up north, just slightly though, however. But nonetheless here, these collisions between warm and cold, which are definitely apparent on here and also apparent on other models that we're about to look at as well, definitely lead me to think that at least on the severe side, things are going to pick up. Wintry side, I think we'll still have a few storms to talk about over the next couple of weeks here as we close out the month. So here's that last cold shot the last huge cold shot that we're going to be dealing with here. Like I said, it's a quick mover. It's going to be in and out of here by, let's say, Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon. Then here's that warm air mass starting to kick in and actually starting to dominate a bit here. And then here comes that cold air mass starting to combat it. And this is where things start to get a little bit more interesting. And of course, we have the GFS in comparison. And for the most part, it's pretty much a similar deal. But it's really towards the end of the model run where you start to see more interesting things here, more eye-catching features here. So this pronounced cold air mass here, along with this little boundary right here, might lead to a point of interest, especially as this continues to push forward here. Right now, I don't see anything in the way of trough ejections at the moment, thankfully, at least starting out, but maybe down the line there could be one or two. And these trough ejections can be picked up on model data pretty quickly. So like I said, this is just going to be something that you'd have to stay tuned for in future videos to see if anything occurs with that. But right now, nothing super stout in the way of severe weather just yet. But I get the feeling that we're starting to push towards that more and more. That being said, let's go ahead and get into the temperatures here. Like I said, we still have a couple more days of cold to go, particularly towards this weekend, especially as we go through Friday night into Saturday across a large part of the country. We see those incredibly cold temperatures start to swoop back in on Saturday and into Sunday, but eventually we start to snap away from that a little bit. By the time we get into Monday afternoon, those below zero temperatures are gone, and actually as we go into Tuesday morning, we don't even see them as low temperatures anymore either. So one thing to make note of with this, I will say, is with these temperature fluctuations, really can do a number on your immunity. So make sure that you're doing what you need to do to make sure you don't get sick. And like I said, here we go towards the end of next week. We start to actually see those borderline spring-like temperatures here, but this is also kind of a double-edged sword here, because that collision of cold air masses, if that comes in, could be talking about severe weather down the line. So I am keeping an extra close eye on that warming trend here. Depending on how that plays out could determine a lot of how the weather goes down the line. GFS is showing the same thing as the Euro, starting out pretty cold to start out with, but by the time we get into Tuesday, we're starting to see some changes here. Now, a couple things that I'm making note of is it takes a little bit longer on the GFS to warm up versus the Euro. I think GFS is kind of favoring the Gulf states a little bit still, but I'm starting to see parts of southern and maybe even central Georgia coming into play here. Getting into Mississippi and Alabama as well, we're getting some warmer temperatures as well. So, like I said, battle zone still questionable in regards to severe weather coverage. It really just depends on a number of other factors, which we can't really see right now at this range, truthfully. But still, I do see some signals that need to be monitored pretty closely, and we will be, of course, over here in this channel. So that being said, we'll go into one of the parameters that I can look at range, and that's the moisture returns here. So right now, of course, not much to really talk about there. We'll get both of these set up. But looking at the Euro currently, unless you're over towards Florida, there's not really much in the way of dew points to be dealing with here. This is nothing new for anyone in Florida, though. Those 60-degree plus dew points, though, are usually the dew points that we look for in regards to severe weather. And in the short term, of course, like I said before, nothing to really look at until we get into the middle of next week. We start to see the Gulf Coast become the point of interest. Then eventually we start to see the Southeast coming into play here. How those troughs and the low pressure areas that will be accompanying them will determine how a lot of this moisture ends up getting used. I mostly think that some of this is just going to be rainfall, but like I said, you can't let your guard down with these January setups. They can uptrend and downtrend so quickly. But like I said, there are signals there too, so I'm just trying to take it with a grain of salt. I'm kind of tightroping it, if you will, in a way. But if you look at the GFS, pretty much a similar deal here. Like I said, it really won't be till the middle of next week where we start to see those moisture returns coming in. So starting out, it looks like those moisture returns are mainly going to stay confined to the Gulf until we get later into next week. And then we start to see that increase in moisture. And those much richer dew points make it a lot further north once we get things going here. Even getting into Tennessee at the end of the month here. I don't know why I couldn't get that out. But like I said, it looks like the later into the month we go, and maybe towards February, we're seeing some signals to where we might see a couple big storm systems before we're done here. So here's some evidence to back that up here. We're going to actually go ahead and look at our lightning flash density first on the Euro. One of my favorite model parameters to look at here. This is basically showing thunderstorm probabilities based off of lightning flash density. If you see more than 3 flash, usually there's a pretty good chance of thunderstorms. And you can already see here on Monday some pretty good signals over here towards South Texas. And then as time goes on, we see some consistency here, especially as we start to see that return of moisture coming into play here across the Gulf Coast. And eventually this even starts to work its way into the Southeast as we head towards the end of next week. After that, we're just kind of seeing a couple of different storm systems coming in, and the evidence is pretty much there to back up those claims here so far. So a little bit of confidence to be had there. Just at what intensity is still the question for me. And will it reach severe limits even at that point? So like I said, other environmental factors coming into play there. Then last but not least, here's what our model data is looking like. Here's our next storm system right here. We may go live for this tomorrow if we can. Not entirely sure how the time frame is going to pan out for me. I think a lot of this might be done by the time I get back home from work. But if we can get to it, we'll try and cover it. But after that, here's our next storm system. And this is where the severe weather threat starts to come back into play. Not a super stout look over here, but maybe towards south central Alabama, parts of Mississippi, we might have to watch out for some storms. From the look of this right here, it also kind of looked like we might be dealing with overnight storms. But I think it mainly will be isolated in coverage. So far, I would say maybe a marginal risk at best. And then as we continue to go on here, storm systems become a little bit larger, increase in coverage, and maybe a little bit an increase in intensity as well. Some slightly better looks down the line. And then towards the end of this run, here's an interesting little feature right here that may result in not only a nor'easter, but maybe even potential for some ice and some snow, lake effect snow as well, as we look to close out the month here. Pretty much the same thing looking to be said on the GFS starting out. But the storm systems after that point, this is where things kind of get interesting and a little bit wacky at times. This little area of interest right here where we see the ice, 540 lines all the way up here, but that's the surface temperature, that's the mid-level temperatures getting below freezing. We do see a couple areas right here where it's above freezing, but if there's like a little cold layer, because we know cold air likes to sink towards the bottom, this could become a point of interest right here. So like I said, a lot to keep a track of on the wintry side here still, even though we're starting to warm back up. Eventually this becomes a pretty impressive snowstorm, thunderstorm signals starting to show up here down towards the Gulf Coast. No real surprises there. Then here's where things get interesting. We start to see those storm systems become a little bit stronger. Those signals for thunderstorms become a little bit more robust. And then eventually as time goes on here, we see that same storm system that we saw in Euro. Although based off the track of the low, strength of the low, it looks like this isn't going to be quite as impressive as what the Euro is showing. Keep in mind the Euro is 12Z, GFS is 18Z, so we could be looking at an entirely different scenario here as we go towards the end of this run here. So like I said, a lot up in the air still with these setups here, but as we continue to go forward, the storm track changes a little bit further to the north of the polar jet, so maybe a couple of off clipper systems over here towards the northeast. But with the warming trend we have going on a little further to the south here, I do think there's going to be even more storm chances as we go into February, and maybe there could be a hint of a new cold blast signal right here towards the end of this run. So like I said, there's a lot to keep track of still, a lot to prepare for here, but keep in mind a lot of these are still signals too. So we'll have to just kind of let things play out a little bit. Of course, we'll keep you updated here on the channel. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, I appreciate you a bunch. Make sure you hit that like button, smash that subscribe button if you're new around here, and then also hit that share button as well. But that being said, I hope you guys have a good night. I'll see you guys soon. It's been Thaw, Metalhead Weatherman. I'm out of here. I'll see you tomorrow.